I've been making my way through Trails into Reverie, staying up a couple nights to be able to get some extra hours in because of how much I'm enjoying it. But something has been nagging at the back of my mind while I've been playing it, and I want to give this subject the proper room to breathe. Like, I want to make sure that I cover it from all angles. But I love the Trails series. Trails in the Sky Second Chapter is my second favorite game of all time. And so I'm very biased. So please excuse any biases that try to creep in. I'm going to do my best to keep them out myself. But the little problem that's been in the back of my head, the little idea that's been clawing at me is Trails is really special in a lot of ways. But that also makes it really hard to recommend to people. It is very good, but it's also very long. Trails into Reverie is the 10th game in the series. And I had a friend ask me, hey, should I pick up Trails into Reverie? I know you really like that series. Should I try that one out? And I had to say, sure, if you want to, but there are 9 games that come before it that tell you the story. You can pick up whatever game you want to in the series to start with. It kind of doesn't matter if you don't mind getting spoiled for stuff. You can just start wherever. The spoilers aren't going to mean much to you anyway. But it did make me realize that it's a lot harder to recommend Trails than it is everything else. And I don't mean this in a bad way, because I love the series. I recommend everybody play through all 10 games. I mean, it's worth doing. But 10 games is a big ask, and up until very recently, they haven't all been available on one platform. Now they're all on Steam, which is another reason I wanted to make this video, to be able to talk about that and how exciting that is, because now I don't have to tell people to play games across multiple platforms just to be able to keep up with this series. They're all on Steam. You can pick them all up there. In fact, they go on sale just about every time a Steam sale goes up. You can pick up some of the older games and work your way through, or you can start with some of the newer games and go back when you want to know more backstory. I do think the games do a pretty good job, and especially Reverie, at giving you the option for a synopsis or seeing people talk about them. But what this led me to was the realization that among other video game series, Trails is different. Trails is like a book. With a book series, say Way of Kings, for instance, by Brandon Sanderson, the Stormlight Archive, I would never recommend somebody start with Oathbringer. I would always say start with Way of Kings, because it's the first book in the series. You don't want to start Oathbringer and be like, who's this Kaladin guy? What's going on here? And although authors will do little things to try and help you catch up if you started with a book in the middle, you really shouldn't, right? You wouldn't start Lord of the Rings at Return of the King. You'd start at the first book, The Lord of the Rings. It's the same way kind of with TV series, right? Of, hey, you wouldn't start a TV series in season 6. You'd start the TV series in season 1. You might catch a little bit of season 6 on television if you're flipping through channels. I don't know anybody that still has cable, but if you did, or maybe a preview for something will come up on Netflix or something, but most of the time you're gonna start with the original. And that's very different from the way that video games normally do things. Now, don't get me wrong. There are book series and there are TV series that are mostly disconnected from each other. Gundam is a great example of a series I love where you can basically start anywhere, right? You don't have to start with First Gundam because they don't all go in a line the way that they do in other things. There are some that absolutely do. First Gundam into Zeta, into Double Zeta, into Char's Counterattack. But you don't have to do that, right? But when I look at video games, most of the series we have in video games that are big name series don't really need any previous information. You don't really have to have played the former games to get it. You can play any Zelda game, basically. Tears of the Kingdom, you might be a little bit more confused if you didn't play Breath of the Wild. But you can basically play any Zelda game. Even like Majora's Mask doesn't really require you to know anything from Ocarina of Time other than, hey, Link has a horse. The Super Mario games are mostly disconnected from each other. Even with like Odyssey 1 and 2, you don't really need to know what happened in Odyssey 1 to be able to play and enjoy Odyssey 2. Final Fantasy, they're mostly separate. Grand Theft Auto, Castlevania, even the Resident Evil games that have a continuing story in a lot of ways are still mostly disconnected from each other. The 6, I guess, would be the big difference there, but they're mostly just their own separate stories told in that world. And it makes it very different compared to Trails, which is one continuous story all the way through. And again, you can pick up Reverie. And even if you don't read any of the dossiers they give you on what's happened previously in the series, you can pick up Reverie and you can introduce characters and be like, okay, I guess that person's named Estelle and that person's named Joshua, and they got some stuff going on. That person's named Agate, and he's going to reference stuff that came before. But unlike in some book series, I'm going to be good and not name them, where you get introduced to a character from a previous book and they spend 2 pages catching you up on what that character did in the previous books that you probably already read. In Trails, when you run into, like, let's say Agate, right, for example, they don't go, this is Agate Crossner. He comes from Trails in the Sky. He comes from a little village. You know, they don't get into all that because they expect you to know that. Instead, the character profile backgrounds will give you a little bit of information on them that'll help you remember what they've been doing. And when you talk to Agate, he talks about, hey, you know, I'm here for this. And a character might get introduced that the characters you're currently playing as don't know. And then you might get some more information. But at no point do they go, yeah, you know, this is everything that happens here. And I'm trying not to get too much into the weeds here, but I should just say spoilers on for the Trail series. But for instance, you'll hear, oh, well, that character was really important for the thing that happened in Liberl. Yeah, no, they definitely were super important for that. This doesn't get into any of the struggles they went through here. This doesn't get into anything that happened. A great example is at one point in the Cold Steel series, you go to a small town that has been ruined. And that town is very important to the Sky series. And there are characters referenced there. But you don't get any of the big moments. They don't bring them up. They don't flash back to them because they expect you to know them from the Sky trilogy. They expect you to know what that grave is there for. They expect you to know what that means, you know? And as much as I love that, it does make it harder to recommend Trails to somebody than it does Tales to somebody, for instance, because those games aren't really connected. I can say, hey, there's a new Tales game coming out. Are you going to pick it up? And I can say, you probably should. The series is pretty good. There's some stinkers in there, but the series is pretty good. Or, hey, a new Final Fantasy's coming out. Are you going to pick it up? I think it's worth playing because, you know, obviously I haven't played the new one yet, but I think it's good. I beat 16. That's not what I'm talking about here. But if a new Trails game comes out, like Kuro comes out, and I go, hey, are you going to pick up Kuro? And they go, well, yeah, what do I need to know ahead of time? It's, well, you need to play these 10 games, probably. Now, Kuro's a little bit special because it's starting in Calvard, so it's kind of different. It would be like if you started in Erebonia or started in Crossbell, which you absolutely can. Those are the places to start, in my mind. You either start at Sky First Chapter, or you start at 0, or you start at Cold Steel 1. You don't start at Cold Steel 3. So Kuro's a little bit different, but even like Kuro 2, right? Well, should I start there? No, probably not. You can, but you probably shouldn't. Whereas if somebody goes, hey, can I start the Final Fantasy series with Final Fantasy X? Yeah, go for it. 10's a great game. I think you'll really like it. Well, do I need to play the other 9 first? No, not really. There's references in there, but it's not a big deal, you know? Somebody goes, hey, I want to play DMC 5. Do I need to know what happened in the other DMCs? It's like, well, I mean, you're going to miss out on a little bit of information. You're not going to quite know what's going on with some things. But Dante is still really cool. Hero's still great. I mean, you're not going to need a lot of information to recognize how cool these guys are. Like Metal Gear, for instance. Somebody goes, hey, can I start with Metal Gear Solid 2? Well, yeah. Actually, you super can. You won't know everything about this Solid Snake they keep referencing, but you will know that he was a cool guy, and that's really all you need to know until things get revealed, and they go into detail, kind of like the books I mentioned earlier about, yeah, Solid Snake did this, and Solid Snake did that. And it's weird that Trails is like this one big standout in that way, and I'm sure there are other series I'm just not thinking of. I guess Yakuza would be another, Like a Dragon, as they're calling it now. You can start with Like a Dragon, right? You can start with 7, but you're missing out on all that information for why what Kiryu and Majima and Saejima have done matters. All the other characters, you're missing out on important stuff there. So I guess that's another series that I would say you probably should start at 0 or 1, but you don't really have to. I mean, you could start basically anywhere. I started with Yakuza 4 and went back and played the others, you know? It's just really interesting how Trails stands out from the crowd in both the best way and also in the worst way. Because I'm going to be honest with you, when I say, hey, I love the Trail series, I think you should play all 10 games, most people go, ugh, 10 games? Or if I say, you know, somebody goes, well, what's your top 3 favorite games of all time? Okay, well, it's Dark Souls 1, Trails in the Sky 2nd chapter, and Tales of the Abyss. And they go, well, okay, I've played Dark Souls. That one's all right. What about that Trails game? It's like, well, you got to play the first game first to really get what's going on in 2nd chapter. But they're great games. And there's 3rd chapter too, and that's a trilogy. Okay, well, how many Trails games are there? Well, there's 10 of them. And just see the wall go up in their eyes. And it's like, look, I get it. I do. I understand. But they're so worth it if you will give them the time. And I know there's going to be some people in the comments that are like, well, what about Halo or Mass Effect or Last of Us or Witcher? Those are all series that you have to play the previous games. You really don't, though. I know a lot of people that started with Mass Effect 2 and never played Mass Effect 1. I know a lot of people that only played Witcher 3 and never played the previous games. Because they don't really require you to know those stories in the way that Trails does. And that does not mean you can't just start with Trails into Reverie today. You might start it and say, you know what? I really think these characters are cool. I want to go back and learn what happened. I just feel like your experience is boosted immeasurably if you've already played through the previous games to get there. At the end of the day, obviously, it's up to you. I feel like maybe I'm making bigger of an issue of this than it really is, but I'm really curious what your thoughts are on it, because I do really love this series, and it stands out to me in how much of like a book it really is, where I just want to continue the series. I want it to keep going, even though I recognize that for every new game that comes out in the series, it makes it harder for new people to get into it. Do you think that people should just start with Reverie and not worry about it? Just go ahead and make the jump, and if they like Reverie, they can go back and catch the previous games? Or do you think that they should absolutely start in 1st chapter no matter what? Really curious as to your thoughts, so please let me know. And until next time, I'm going to be playing Trails into Reverie. I'm looking forward to getting the review out for it. Let me know your thoughts, and I've been Trey. This has been The Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum that Trails has to offer.